You are not real. But if you don't believe me, let's bring in the big guns. The French philosopher Jean Baudrillard and Kurt Gödel, the mathematician who proved that logic itself has plot holes. Baudrillard had a simple but devastating idea. We don't live in reality anymore. We live in simulacra, layers upon layers of symbols and signs that replace the real thing, to the point that we no longer know or care what was real to begin with. Baudrillard would say we are past the point where we can distinguish between the real self and the simulated self. At this stage, we don't even know if we ever had a real self to begin with. The map has replaced the territory. Your reflection in the mirror has replaced whatever you actually are. And honestly, does it even matter? For those questioning their reality and self-identity, Baudrillard's work serves as a philosophical flashlight, illuminating the potential pitfalls of a life saturated with images and signs. Every day we navigate through a landscape rich in simulacra, where the pressure to conform to idealized images and lifestyles can create a profound sense of disconnection from our true selves. Think about the resurgence of brands appropriating ancient symbols, the widespread use of the ankh in fashion, or the Ouroboros in jewelry. These symbols, steeped in rich historical and spiritual meaning, have been co-opted into trendy aesthetics, often devoid of their original context. The ankh, an Egyptian hieroglyph representing life and immortality, now adorns clothing and accessories, transformed into a fashion statement rather than a sacred emblem. This phenomenon raises poignant questions. What happens to the essence of these symbols when they are commercialized? In Baudrillard's terms, we have moved beyond the reflection of reality into a realm where these signs no longer signify what they once did. Instead, they become simulacra, representations that detach from their origins and take on a new life. Alchemy, once a profound philosophical and proto-scientific pursuit, focused on transformation and the quest for enlightenment, is often trivialized in modern media. When one searches for alchemy in Google, they encounter references to popular video games like Final Fantasy or Dark Souls, where it serves as a gameplay mechanic for crafting potions or enhancing abilities. Now, let's add some existential spice with Kurt Gödel, the genius who ruined math for mathematicians. His incompleteness theorems basically say, any logical system will always have statements that are true but unprovable within that system. In other words, no system can fully explain itself. It will always be haunted by gaps, paradoxes, and frustrating loose ends. If math, the most precise language we have, can't even prove itself, what do you think that means for you? Your mind, the very thing you use to define reality, is running on buggy software. You will never fully understand yourself, because the system, your brain, can't step outside itself to get a clear picture. It's like trying to see your own eyes without a mirror. Your identity is a self-referential paradox, and any attempt to define it just creates more illusions. This explains why deep introspection often leads to existential panic rather than enlightenment. The more you dig into who you really are, the more you realize it's all just arbitrary definitions built on a foundation of assumptions. Godel shows that you can't reach a final airtight conclusion about your own nature. There will always be a missing piece, a blind spot in your understanding. Let's say you're diving into a new hobby, like learning to bake sourdough bread. You start off feeling pretty confident. You watch a couple of YouTube tutorials, gather all the ingredients, and think, I've got this. But then you discover there's a whole science behind fermentation, gluten development, and the importance of patience. Suddenly, you're knee-deep in recipes, watching videos on bread hydration levels, and feeling like a total novice all over again. Gödel encapsulates that feeling perfectly. The more you dive into a subject, the more you realize how vast and complex it really is. Just like sourdough, knowledge can be a wild, unpredictable ride. It's like chasing an ever-elusive finish line that keeps moving further away every time you think you're close. That's how looking for the source of one's own self feels. This is actually a popular exercise that many people do every day. It's called self-inquiry. In this practice, there isn't one definitive aha moment that wraps it all up neatly. Instead, you engage in a continuous conversation with yourself, one that's as playful as it is profound. When you start asking, "Who am I?" you quickly discover that your identity is a vast, intricate system with more layers than you ever imagined. The emotional side of knowledge is quite important as well. One can read 1,000 self-help books yet still feel lost. Sometimes wisdom isn't in the facts, but in the feelings and intuitions that arise as we navigate through life. It's like scrolling through motivational quotes on Instagram. While they might inspire you in the moment, they often fall flat when faced with real-life challenges. Gödel's wisdom reminds us that intuition and emotional understanding play vital roles in knowledge acquisition. You might know all the theories on happiness, but true understanding often comes from lived experiences, the times you stumbled, learned, and grew. It's those moments that create genuine insight, a blend of emotional resonance and intellectual curiosity that makes knowledge transformative. Your identity is not a monolith, it's more like a flowing river. You're not just one thing, and the more you try to pin it down, the more it slips away. One day you're deep in philosophical musings, and the next you might find yourself laughing at cat memes. Each of these aspects is a part of you, but they don't define you wholly. The idea of a consistent self is more of a comforting illusion than a solid reality. Reality can feel like a multi-layered mirage. Gödel's incompleteness theorem suggests that no system can fully explain itself. The same goes for our perception of reality. What you see isn't necessarily what is. Life is a series of interpretations and reinterpretations, a constant loop of questioning and recontextualizing. Our understanding of the world is filtered through personal biases, social conditioning, and collective experiences. What seems real today may morph into something entirely different tomorrow. Between Baudrillard's simulated self and Gödel's broken logic, the conclusion is clear. You're not real in the particular way you think you are. It's totally fine to feel confused or lost. After all, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards.